Bonsoir et bienvenue à notre séance Conseil, la première séance pour l'année 2024. Je prends cette opportunité pour souhaiter une bonne année à vous tous, les gens qui nous regardent par le web diffusion et bien sûr les gens qui nous accompagnent dans la salle. Good evening and welcome to our first council meeting for 2024. Happy New Year to everyone, health and happiness above all. Thank you for those watching on the webcast and the folks that are here with us in the room. Je suis accompagné, comme d'habitude, avec des membres du Conseil, M. Benoît Langevin, bonsoir. Mme Louise Leroux, bonsoir, bonne année. Mme Catherine Clément-Talbot, elle arrive présentement, et M. Sharki Tarakjan, Shahid Tarakjan, il est absent ce soir et à l'extérieur. Et comme d'habitude, on a les membres de nos services ici à la table et les gens à côté qui sont là pour nous aider à répondre à des questions si jamais on n'a pas la réponse. So once again, we are accompanied by the members of council. As I mentioned, Benoît Langevin, Louise Leroux, Catherine Clément-Talbot, Shahid Tarakjan is absent this evening. And out of town, we have, of course, the members of our services that are here with us at the table and others that are at the side of the room. Should we not be able to answer any of your questions, certainly we will do that with their support. We don't have the police representative. Nous n'avons pas l'SPVM avec nous ce soir. Comme j'avais mentionné et on avait mentionné comme administration le mois passé, le commandant chez nous, au poste 3, a quitté ses fonctions chez nous pour avoir un autre poste ailleurs à Montréal. Et maintenant, on a quelqu'un par intérim au poste 3 et on va communiquer avec lui pour s'assurer qu'il se présente au prochain conseil au mois de février. We normally begin our council meeting, of course, with the representative from our SPVM, the commander. And as we mentioned last December, and he mentioned when he was here with us before the holidays, that he will no longer be the commander of our Community Station 3. He will be leaving. He left for another position in another post in Montreal. So the gentleman that will be filling in the interim, unfortunately, isn't here tonight, and we will make sure that he will be with us in February to give us a little bit of the highlights of the last month. Je voulais commencer avec quelques informations. Nous avons annoncé sur les médias sociaux, le site web de l'arrondissement, que la nouvelle programmation hiver-printemps de la culture et des bibliothèques, et je vais vous dire, vous pouvez aller consulter, pardon, parce qu'on a une situation. OK, c'est beau, c'est correct, c'est mieux? Parfait, merci. On avait un écho. La nouvelle programmation hiver-printemps de la culture et des bibliothèques, vous pouvez procurer une version papier des activités planifiées pour cette saison. Nous avons 13 spectacles, on a des activités à la bibliothèque, dans les bibliothèques, et je vous encourage fortement, comme je fais à chaque mois, de participer à des événements qu'on fait à l'arrondissement parce que ça prend des mois et des mois de planification par les services. Monsieur Duliep, s'il vous plaît, encore transmettre les félicitations et les remerciements de la part de nos conseils. Conseillers, conseillères, parce que c'est un travail qui n'est pas fait sur le coin de la table. Ça prend beaucoup de temps et beaucoup de préparation pour planifier les activités. Et à compter de 20 janvier, les activités commencent et vous pouvez aller consulter le site web, les médias sociaux aussi pour trouver les informations. We have our winter spring program that is released now for culture and our library activities. So we encourage you once again, not only if you can't get the paper version available in our municipal buildings, but you can also go on our website and social media to obtain that information to make sure you know what's going on in our community and take advantage of all the hard work by our services to put this program together. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes many months and a lot of planning to put it together and to make sure that it's geared towards providing viable services and activities to the population. And we've been successful up until now, and we're very fortunate to have the library like we have here in Pierrefonds-Roxboro to be able to extend the offer that we have in terms of culture. I know Mme Talbot, I say it all the time, Mme Talbot travaille très fort au niveau de la culture pour nous orienter vers les décisions qu'on prend aussi à l'arrondissement, parce qu'on n'est pas tous les experts en culture, mais je sais que Mme Talbot travaille très fort pour nous encourager d'investir et de faire des activités au niveau de la culture. Aussi, on lance la nouvelle programmation en loisirs, comme on a fait d'ailleurs en 2023 avec le plan d'action en loisirs. Je suis très fier de vous annoncer la période d'inscription est en cours pour toutes les activités offertes. Et je vous donne quelques exemples. Les cours de groupe dans nos bâtiments municipaux, on parle de yoga, des Zumba. Madame Leroux est une experte en Zumba, bootcamp. Je voulais dire c'est une blague, mais c'est pas une blague. On sait très bien. On essaie tous à faire des activités physiques, vous savez, et on a des cours de groupe pour offrir à la population. On a le pickleball en gymnase libre dans l'école Saint-Anthony, dans l'ouest de l'arrondissement. Bien sûr, le badminton libre qui est très, 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 très populaire à PCHS. On a les sports d'équipe de type multisport pour les jeunes. Les gyms ouverts qu'on a partout pour les jeunes qui ne veulent pas nécessairement participer à des activités organisées, mais ils veulent se présenter dans les gyms. Je sais que Ajoie, à l'époque, était très responsable pour offrir ce service aux jeunes, et ça continue et ça va très bien. So once again, the recreational programming, the new sessions have begun. Registrations you can do online, of course. And as I mentioned in French, some of the group programs that are available are things like yoga, Zumba, boot camp, all these things that can be done with other folks, pickleball, and open gym programs that are available at our St. Anthony gym, which is in the western part of Pierrefonds on Meloche. We have badminton, which is a very popular sport, and the gym is, used to its full capacity at PCHS. We also have the many different sports that are available for our youth, understanding that they are the ones that will, adopt the healthy things in life and continue, hopefully, in sport the rest of their lives. Je voulais vous dire aussi que l'animation sportive dans nos parcs cet hiver avec le récréobus est planifiée pour les semaines à venir. C'est déjà commencé. C'est commencé cette fin de semaine, samedi passé, pour la première fois. On a d'autres sessions le 20 janvier au parc Alexander et le 27 janvier dans le parc Rive-Boisée entre 10h et 16h. Our Recreo bus, for those that have seen it on the road, it's a bus that we had decided as council years back to invest in to make sure that we have mobile activities going to our different parks, understanding that our territory is immense and 30 kilometers wide. We were bringing the recreation activities to our population and not necessarily always asking them to attend the different activities that we were doing. And so the idea behind that was to occupy that bus with the experts that we have in our Recreation, Culture, Social Development Department to be able to bring these types of activities to the neighborhood parks and encourage the local communities and the children that live in these areas to be involved in active lifestyles. And so, as I mentioned, it started last Saturday. The next session is on the 20th of January from 10 to 4 at Alexander Park, and the 27th of January from 10 to 4 once again at Rive-Boisée, just behind the City Hall. Marquez vos calendriers parce que c'est l'événement plaisir d'hiver, or in other words, our winter carnival, if you will. And ça serait au parc Amabay, dans l'est de l'arrondissement, le 17 février, de 13h jusqu'à 16h. Une panoplie d'activités hivernales. On participe tous à cet événement-là. On essaye chaque année de changer l'emplacement. on était au parc Grillé, on était au parc Roxboro, on va aller au parc Amabé. Et encore une autre fois, le but, ce n'est pas de demander aux gens de se déplacer nécessairement, mais c'est de faire les événements un peu partout dans l'arrondissement et donner la chance aux gens qui demeurent dans ces secteurs de participer. Les gens qui n'ont pas nécessairement le transport pour aller dans l'ouest de la ville ou de l'arrondissement, qui ont au moins l'opportunité de faire l'activité près de chez eux. So we have our Winter Carnival that is planned this year at Amabé Park on Gouin in the eastern portion of the borough. And it will be planned on the 17th of February, as I mentioned, from 1 to 4 p.m. And again, the idea behind this Winter Carnival is not only to provide the different winter activities that encourage folks to get out with their families and participate in the sport and all the activities that we have planned around that, but it's also to bring these activities to the different sectors of our borough, as we've done in the past, having it in the western portion at Greer Park, or when we had it in Roxboro in years past, and now we're in Amabé. It's to give the opportunity to the local communities that live there to be able to benefit from some of the activities that maybe others have more available to them. On sait très bien que la saison des patinoires extérieures, et je vais vous dire avec l'expérience, il y avait une époque où on avait les patinoires prêtes début décembre. Je vais vous dire honnêtement, début décembre, on avait les patinoires prêtes à l'époque même. Maintenant, avec la température, vous savez, c'est très, très, très difficile, surtout avec les patinoires qui sont installées sur le gazon. Ça prend quand même un fond de neige. Ça prend aussi la température quand même propice pour faire la glace. Ce n'est pas évident. Je vais vous dire, avant, on était chanceux d'avoir 10 semaines à peu près de temps de patin à l'extérieur. Maintenant, on est chanceux d'avoir 4. Et c'est pour cette raison-là qu'on fait les démarches auprès de la Ville de Montréal pour investir éventuellement dans les patinoires réfrigérées un peu partout sur le territoire. C'est très dispendieux. On est très au courant des coûts associés à l'entretien et l'installation de ces patinoires réfrigérées. Mais c'est quelque chose qu'on commence depuis quelques années quand même pour s'assurer qu'on a au moins des activités à l'extérieur pour surtout les jeunes, pour les occuper pendant l'hiver. Ils ne sont pas prêtes les patinoires encore, ils sont presque là. Il ne faut pas se comparer aussi avec les villes, arrondissements où les patinoires sont patinables. Et je vous donne un exemple. À Pointe-Claire, au coin de Cartier et Lakeshore, ils ont un patinoire qui est ouverte depuis un mois. Ça, c'est une patinoire, un rond, une piste réfrigérée. Et les autres, récemment ouvertes depuis une semaine, ailleurs, ils sont des installations, les patinoires qui sont déjà sur les terrains de tennis. L'asphalte, le ciment, où c'est beaucoup plus facile d'arroser et de faire geler la glace comme plus sécuritaire que le gazon. Le gazon prend un fond plus beaucoup d'eau pour s'assurer que la glace est sécuritaire pour patiner. So very briefly on our outdoor skating rinks, there was once a time where we had 10 weeks of skating time, if not more. We've gotten to the point now where we're lucky if we have 4 weeks. Take away the school time, take away the bad weather, take away the night hours, take away the parks that don't have lights. You're not left with a lot of skating time outside and a lot of resources and effort that go to that. And so on that, we have looked at for the last couple of years investing gradually, realistically, understanding the capacity of our taxpayer to pay, in looking at refrigerated ice rinks that will prolong the winter session. Not everywhere, because these things they cost millions, but at least to start somewhere and have a program where every few years a city or a borough looks at investing money. We certainly would need money from the Montreal city, but we would also reach out to the other government levels to make sure we have money to do that. Because when you have a refrigerated rink, like a synthetic soccer field, it prolongs the season much longer with very little maintenance to do with that. And so that is something that we're still thinking about in the back of our minds. So, une naissance prévue dans votre famille en 2024, on ne sait jamais. Je vous invite à mettre la main sur votre boîte Bienvenue bébé, spécialement conçu pour vous permettre de profiter des installations de la ville avec votre nouveau-né. So we mentioned this last month. We have our, I don't even know how to translate that, our baby boxes. For the new births in 2024, there will be these little boxes that will be available with some, material there for new mothers, of course, and their babies. And this was an initiative that we piggybacked on with the City of Montreal, and we made sure we brought that to our borough as well, because we try to do our little part as well to support the young families in our community. Today is also, for those of you that know or may not know, it's Martin Luther King Day. Et la seule raison pourquoi je souligne cette commémoration, événement, fête, comme vous voulez, c'est parce que there is no better time than today, and in the world that we live in, that there isn't a call for peace. And so when we look at what Martin Luther King stood for, I had the privilege of meeting his grandson years ago. Absolutely unforgettable experience. When I was in charge of a dossier in Montreal, had the privilege of meeting him, and his words resonated with that man as well today as they were then. And when we see with what's going on in the world, we need to make sure that we are conscious of the fact that not much has changed in all those years. And so we do our little part as best we can, and we remember the legacy and the memory of the man that at the end of the day, wanted peace. So on that, Madame Leroux.
Merci, Monsieur le maire. Écoutez, j'aimerais prendre quelques minutes pour souligner le départ d'une personne qui a été quand même proche. C'est Georges Bass, qui était... Vassilios, qui était le papa de notre maire, Jim Bass. Donc, il est parti il y a quelques jours, jeudi passé. Monsieur le maire, trop humble, ne voulait pas le souligner, mais moi, je trouve que c'est important. Je pense qu'on a un maire comme il est présentement grâce au papa qu'il a eu. Et il est ici, il fait son travail, il a continué, il a pas, et je pense que c'est tout en son honneur là, de vouloir représenter les citoyens tous les jours, d'aller et de continuer, même si présentement il vit une épreuve difficile. Donc, j'aimerais qu'on prenne une minute de silence pour souligner le départ de M. Bass.
Merci. Monsieur Brunet, on peut commencer avec notre séance conseil par la période des questions des citoyens. Merci.
Bonsoir. Mesdames, Messieurs, permettez-moi de vous rappeler que certaines règles s'appliquent lorsque vous intervenez devant les membres du Conseil d'arrondissement. Tout intervenant doit s'inscrire avant la séance du Conseil de façon à avoir le droit de poser des questions, limitées à 2. Tout intervenant sera appelé selon l'ordre de son inscription. Votre question doit se limiter uniquement au sujet qu'elle touche. Elle doit être claire, précise et sans préambule. Vous devez être poli et respectueux envers les membres du Conseil. Si vous ne respectez pas ces règles, vous serez invité à vous retirer et à quitter la salle du Conseil. Vous posez votre question, prière de vous avancer au micro et vous adresser uniquement au maire qui préside la séance du Conseil. Pour votre information, la période de questions initiale est de 30 minutes avec une possibilité de prolongation pour 15 minutes. Après ce délai, la période de questions est suspendue et sur motion d'un conseiller, une prolongation supplémentaire de 30 minutes pourra être faite après la disposition de l'ordre du jour. Sachez que la prise de photos, de vidéos et d'enregistrement est interdite sans l'autorisation du maire. Nous vous demandons de bien vouloir fermer tous vos appareils intelligents. Nous vous rappelons également que la séance du Conseil est rediffusée en simultané sur notre site Web. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to remind you that certain rules apply when you address members of the Borough Council. All speakers must register prior to the council sitting in order to have the right to ask questions, limited to 2. Speakers will be called upon in the order in which they register. Your question must be limited to the subject at hand, clear, precise, and without preamble. You must be polite and respectful to council members. If you fail to comply with these rules, you will be asked to withdraw and leave the council room. To ask your question, please step up to the microphone and address only the mayor, who is chairing the council sitting. For your information, the initial question period is 30 minutes with the possibility of a 15-minute extension. After this time, question period is suspended, and on a councilor's motion, an additional 30-minute extension may be granted after the agenda has been disposed of. Please note that it is forbidden to take photos, videos, or recordings without the mayor's permission. We kindly ask you to turn off all your smart devices. We would also like to remind you that the council sitting will be broadcasted simultaneously on our website. We now invite Mr. Andrew Jude for the first question.
Good evening, Mr.
Good
Mayor.
evening.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well.
My question relates to Roger Street, which you may or may not know of.
I know it very
You know
well.
it?
Yes.
My question is as follows. I represent the residents on the street. The residents like to know why, 1 week before Christmas, there were a series of no parking signs installed on Roger Street only, prohibiting parking on either side of the street for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Thank you for your question. And Happy New Year to you as well. The request came in as I preside the Road Safety and Traffic Committee. We get a number of requests from citizens to evaluate situations on the road, whether it's speed, whether it's parking, narrowness of street, and other issues. This was one that was brought to us, I believe, in the fall of 2022 by a resident. And a decision was taken by, a recommendation was made following a very strict analysis of the street to find out what some of the issues were in regards to parking. When we do this, there's a process. And it's not the city necessarily or the borough representatives that decide this alone. We have members of the SPVM, we have engineers, we have our Public Works Department and others that participate in these deliberations. And we look at close to 100 a month, for example. More often than not, the requests that are made or complaints that are made regarding a given situation on road safety stay status quo. The evaluation is done. We make sure that we look at all aspects of road safety, and when that's analyzed, more often than not, doesn't merit any traffic curbing measures per se. In your case, the complaint was initially that the street was, I believe it was too narrow once cars were parked. So what happens at that point? The committee looks at evaluating how wide the street is. When it is a certain, and I don't have it off the top of my head now, but when it's a certain width, sometimes by law, there is no parking permitted on the road at all times. And I suspect this is the case for Roger Street. I know it very well. And I know where it is, and I know it very well. What I suspect it is because the road itself, and I will verify that and we will make sure to get back to you, but I suspect that the road was too narrow to begin with. And so having said that, once we know of that issue, and there are other streets in all those sectors of the borough, for example, that if we were to evaluate them today, would not allow for parking. And that's the reality we have when we have older communities that were built in a way back then that don't necessarily respond to today's standards. And so that could be the issue, and I suspect that's what it was, if I remember, because that was, I think, passed at council here in May of 2023, if I'm not mistaken. And then by the time the mobilization takes place to get the signs in place and all that takes, unfortunately, more time than we'd like, but that's why they were installed the time they were. That is the explanation I have for you tonight, but I will investigate this further with our committee people to find out why that decision was made, but I believe that's what the reason was.
Thank you for your answer. My second question also relates to Roger Street.
Yeah.
Are you aware of the significant security risks on the street, primarily due to the exponential increase in traffic that has occurred over the last 30 years, and the fact that a number of residents at various times have come to the City Council requesting various interventions, traffic calming measures, all of which have been refused? And I would cite myself as an example. From 2006 to 2011, I took public transit and walked down the street. During that period of time, I was hit by cars on 5 occasions, notwithstanding the fact that I carried a lamp. And similar experiences have been reported to me by our residents as well. The last count we took on the street, we were averaging in the period of time from 6 o'clock till 9 o'clock in the morning, 800 to 900 cars. That exceeds St. Catherine Street at the corner of Atwater, which is a 3-lane street, single direction. So again, are you aware of the situation? Because I have to report to you that the residents on the street have reported to me not only their dissatisfaction with the no parking signs, but the fact that it seems like over the past 30 years we've been the objects of benign neglect, and the first intervention on the street to deal with anything related to the complaints of the residents is to restrict their parking and to potentially increase the speed of the through traffic at these periods of time and the danger, to the residents and their visitors.
Thank you very much for that comment. And the fact that cars were parked on a street not wide enough to allow for parking, that in itself is a security issue, number one. Number two, neglect on a street. I refuse to accept that there's neglect on any street, and I'll tell you why. We have 250 kilometers of residential streets. We have requests from residents like yourself and others, as I mentioned earlier, that we look at with the city services on a regular basis to evaluate what some of the issues are on a given street. You telling me there's 700-800 cars per day on that street doesn't necessarily mean that there's a traffic violation or a security issue. Now, are they going too fast? That could be what we analyze. The number of vehicles necessarily isn't always the determining factor. So the street being narrow is one thing in terms of safety with cars parked. Then if you tell me that that street, and I know it is, and I'm telling you I know it is, where cars use that street to wayfind through the community to get to Antoine Faucon or back home through Meloche and that area too, because I know it very well. So if that is the case, and we know that that's the case, you can't stop them from using that street. What we do at that point is we analyze that street to make sure that at least traffic or speed is being respected. How do we do that? We make sure we analyze it. We have speed counters. We involve the police. For example, at the end of your street, that corner, as they're coming onto your street, nobody makes that stop. I know it. Mm-hmm. And you know who doesn't do that? The residents that live in that area, with respect. And the reason that happens is because they're rushing to get out of that area. I know it very well. I've almost been hit there on my bike. I know. But if that is a case where it involves intervention from the authorities, let's say, that's why the commander comes here, for example, because we bring to his attention a lot of these things and they try to create a presence, if you will, to make sure that they address some of those issues. The speed part of it, certainly if you have made a request before for that street or any of your neighbors has, if it has been analyzed, I will make sure that we go back to that to find out if it was decided that there was no traffic curbing measures for one reason or another, what they were. Because it could be that there wasn't excess speed on that street. And we can't put a traffic curbing measure if the speed limit is being respected. Because then that would apply to 250 kilometers of streets. So there's a process to it, is what I'm trying to tell you. And I'm listening to you. I've heard you. We will make sure Mr. Baudouin, who is our head of our public works, is on that committee as well. We will make sure that at our next committee, Traffic and Road Safety Committee, that we look at the background of Roger Street, number one, to see what other decisions were made in the past. And could it have changed now, since then, with people's habits wayfinding through your area? And if that's the case, then certainly we could look at it again to see if there's something that we can do. Look, since we've been here, and since I've been presiding that committee, I can't tell you the countless amount of interventions that we've made on all kinds of streets. And you know what happens a lot of the times? When we put a speed bump or a freestanding marker, there are folks on that street that say, we don't want a speed bump. What do you mean you don't want a speed bump? We just gauge cars going at 60, 70 kilometers on a pretty regular basis on your street. No, but it's going to affect the street. So to me, I'll justify that if I have to. It's the other way around that I need to make sure that if there is speed on your street, that we do everything we can to try to find a solution for that. I don't know what the solution is now. I'm being very honest with you. But it's something that we have to look at. And now that you bring it up, I would request from you that you email me. You have my email, you can get it from the website, and you can send it to me. And the reason I tell you that is because when I get it like that, then we can triage it to our services, and we can make sure that we do the proper process to try to find some resolve, okay? But what happens is I'll give you another example. If, for example, let's say we do a traffic curbing measure on your street. Let's say we find out that, yes, cars are going, forget the numbers of cars, but the cars are going at a high speed. What do we do then? Let's say we put a speed bump or two, let's say. You know what's going to happen? What always happens is those folks that wayfind through your street go to the next street. And then they'll go to the next street. And then they'll wayfind through other areas. That's why traffic, and honestly, road safety, and I've said it many times here, people have heard me say it a million times, it's one of the most difficult or biggest challenges we have in every community, because people are so eager to get to where they're going, they forget that they're behind a wheel and could cause serious damage. But we've noted what you've said, sir, and we will make sure that we will look at your street. In the meantime, I'll look at what decisions, if there are any prior on your street, and we'll relay that information to you, okay? Just so you know how to situate yourself from the past, okay?
I will respond to your request and collect the information from my residents and send it on
Perfect.
to you. And
Perfect.
just my comment about benign neglect wasn't a criticism of
I
the city.
understand.
I've been on that street since 1988.
I understand.
It was simply an observation of the past.
I understand, but I just want to assure you that that's not the case at all. And as we move forward, let's try to come up with some solution, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Prochaine question, M. Nicolas Tomaro. Mais on m'a mentionné qu'il avait quitté, donc quelqu'un va lui revenir par téléphone.
Excellent,
pour
merci.
lui répondre. Maintenant, nous appelons
Madame Blain.
Mrs. Geneviève Blain.
Yes.
Hey, on behalf also of my neighbor.
We live on the same street.
Yeah, so we live on Neo Street, and there was an issue about the CJEP students parking over the length of a street corner
Yeah,
between St. Croix and St. Yves.
yeah.
And you put no parking signs, 24/7. So our question is, can the no parking sign on the street can be left just where the parking issue was and be removed for the rest of the street where there were no parking issue, because over 95% of the time, there's no car parked?
Yeah, we both lived there for 35 years, so like, we never had an issue with parking, and then there was no consultation or anything, and then all of a sudden, one day, the
Boom.
parking signs went up, and then we did contact the city and find out it's because of the CJEP students parking there. But it's just at the bottom of the street.
Right. No, thank you for coming in. I know Neo. My dad lived on Neo at one time, so I know Neo. We talked about my dad earlier, and funny enough, somebody from Neo is here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Same.
Between St. Croix and Barrington, that strip there is relatively narrow. So not only is it narrow, but it's also hinders some of the snow clearing operations that my Director of Public Works can speak of if he has to. And that was the reason behind that section being no parking. You said without consultation. And I mentioned to the gentleman earlier, the consultation we have is sometimes somebody will bring something to our attention. This was the case for that street. And then when it was analyzed, found that that corner, that stretch from Barrington down was problematic. That's why. But I will look into this again to make sure that I get all the information regarding the decision that was made or the recommendation that was done by our committee and that council approved, I think, early in 2023, probably around the same time as we did Roger at that time. And then once we do that, I'll make sure that I communicate that to you to at least understand the reasoning. You know, I always tell folks, and I tell everybody in our administration, I may not have sometimes, or we may not have sometimes the answer that people want to hear, but you need to have a clear answer on why those decisions were made. At the end of the day, we may all disagree, but there will be a clear reason on why that was made. And so, again, off the top of my head, because we evaluate so many other files, I don't know offhand why we had decided that stretch, but offhand it tells me that that little strip was because it was too narrow for all those operations to take place.
Well, the answer we got from the city was that that's parking situation between St. Croix and St. Yves. But it's like the decision was applied to the entire street, but if there's no car parked, there's no issue. I can tell you, because it happened this afternoon, that the plow had no problem driving through. There was no car. There were no car parked.
Well,
So
generally
to us,
during,
this no parking is just why?
well, generally no.
Does not make sense.
Yeah, and I understand your question, but generally during snow operations, parking is not permitted on any street. And that our community knows. And we make sure we put that on our electronic boards. People know during a snow alert, during snow operations, there is no parking anywhere. You're not allowed to park anywhere. And you know why people park on the street during snow operations and hinder our work crews and cause safety issues? Because they want their driveway cleared.
That I understand.
So
but
I'm just telling you that that's the situation
But-
maybe that people understand they can't park
May-
on the street.
what I'm talking about is the plow, not the plow, the snow blower.
Right.
Coming this afternoon.
Right.
And there were no notice put like they do in Montreal Centre to say people don't park from this time to this time or whatever. They just came and they just
Yeah.
plowed the snow.
No, we don't
because
put-
they knew there were not going to be any cars.
No, but because there aren't any cars. We know there aren't cars parked during a snow operation. So after any snowfall, there's a period of time that the majority of our community knows, because any city, Dollard is the same, whenever there's a snow clearing operation or a blowing operation, there is no one that parks on the streets. They know this. And so far, we're almost there. There are some that still don't respect it, and so when the plows or the blowers go by, sometimes people still park, and then it causes a problem. But in the majority of times, there's nobody there on the streets. You're right. But I will look at it. I will look at it to see what the decision was, again, for that strip, and we'll report back to you, okay?
Because any other time, there's no car. There's no issue driving.
But what's the issue there, just so I understand? Because
Well,
Neil
now
has
I
pretty big
can't-
driveways.
Yeah, but I mean, not that big. Mine is 2 car long.
Okay,
But visitor can't park on that side of the street.
Yeah.
If I have the plumber or the electrician, or like next summer I have the landscaper coming over, they can't park on the side of the street. They can't put the machinery there. They have to park on the other side and cross the street. If they have to dump some soil or whatever, where do they dump it?
no, but let's be realistic here. And I'm going to be as realistic and as sincere as I can. Nobody is searching to ticket a contractor, a plumber, a landscaper. That's not the goal here. The goal is so that folks respect the no parking regulations at any given moment, excluding, the nurse that's going to come to your house. For example, if the landscaper, the plumber, the electrician comes to your house, we understand that that's a regular part of things. And if it is even across the street, those folks will park across the street. It's not because we have a street in front of our house, respectfully, that people need to park necessarily right in front of our house. because the street belongs to everybody. It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to us or you, respectfully. So what I'm trying to say is, if the parking regulations allow only for one side to park, well then, folks, in our opinion, can still make do with that. If it is an issue, then we can look beyond that and figure it out and see what else we can do. But before anything, I want to make sure why that decision was made, number one.
Yeah.
And then
Because-
like I always tell everybody, and I've said it here many times, I can't go to step 3 unless I know step 1. And step 1 is the decision. What decision was and why was it taken? Once I know that, we'll talk again. I'll call you, my services will call you, you'll come here and see me if you have to. I'll come to see you if I have to. We'll do a walkabout in the area. I do that often, many times with residents. And if I have to do that, I'll bring the councillors in that area, Madame Talbot, Monsieur Tarakjan, if he's back. We'll come and see you. We'll do a walkabout with the citizens, and we'll try to make some sense of it. How's that?
Yeah, it's just because it looks like if there's no car parked, why do you put no parking signs?
No,
It's
I
just-
get it. I get it. I hear you. I hear you because you just see that. You don't know why that decision was necessarily made, and I hear you loud and clear. And so
Yeah.
this is why we're going to find out, and we'll get together again very soon. Okay, I promise you.
But I appreciate your
Thank you.
invitation to do a walkabout
Thank you.
with me.
Thank you so much.
I would gladly do it.
Thank you so much. Monsieur Brunet.
We now invite Martha Bond.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What is the date the borough will publish? You have copies of my questions, I believe.
Yep.
Will publish a request for a register for the 5-story project next to the Sportsplex Arena, and under the same topic, the date and time for the public meeting for the 6-story special construction project at 10251 West Guayme Boulevard and 4th Avenue North.
I believe, Monsieur Stéphane, si je me trompe pas, c'est le 5 février à 6 heures pour le projet sur Gouin. So on February the 5th at 6 a.m.
What?
At 6 p.m. I'm sorry, I have 6 a.m. Well, you're an early riser. And the public notice will be published this week, ma'am.
For the
For the
5-story project?
yes.
Okay.
Et pour l'autre à l'Arena? Okay, so the other one next to the Sportsplex hasn't been determined yet, but when
Okay.
that happens, we'll make sure we announce
So
it.
it's not actually this week?
No, this week we're announcing the February the 5th.
And that'll be before the council meeting?
I don't know when the next council meeting is. I suppose yes. Yes.
Why are the UPAC committee and the borough council, that's my second question, approving the demolition of vintage affordable housing and subdivision of lots in many neighborhoods, and the subsequent building of housing that is much less affordable?
Give me an example, Mrs. Bond, because they're very general. I'm not sure. Maybe I
In
can.
fact, there is an item on a minor exemption this month.
Yep.
And I've seen a lot of tear downs throughout our community.
I don't know where they are, what you're talking about. That's why-
Roxboro.
No, but that's why I want you to be more detailed and tell me which
Anyway,
ones.
there's an item this
Mrs.
month.
Mrs. Bond, there's no anyway. If we're talking factual, I need to know the address so that I can give you accurate information. Otherwise, we're just generalizing.
I'm allowed to ask a general question.
Sure, but I can't answer you generally either because I don't have that information then.
It's these only minor exemption, I think, this month.
Yes, you're right.
I forgot the item. Oh, there it is. There's two, actually.
What's the number, ma'am?
Maybe it was not, anyway, it's on Gouin and St. Rose, I think.
I don't have anything this month on that.
Okay. Well, it was it was from December, actually.
From last month?
Yeah. Yeah, it was December. because there was the decisional documents that were
Yeah.
finally printed.
Monsieur Kennel, avez-vous l'information pour ça ou il faut aller chercher?
Anyway, it is in my briefcase, but I
Okay.
don't have it.
Okay, I don't have that information, Mrs. Bond, but certainly.
But it was a 1930 house,
Okay.
and it was to be triple, the request was for a triple subdivision,
Okay.
demolishing the house.
Okay.
And the decision was to allow the demolition and one other house. And there was something about, actually, part of the lot might have been in a floodable zone.
I don't recall, Mrs. Bond, honestly. I don't recall at all.
But like Laurier or whatever,
I don't recall,
Des
and I
Laurier
just-
in Roxboro.
Delorier isn't in Roxboro, it's in Pierrefonds East.
Okay, Pierrefonds East.
Yeah.
I've seen, like house after house after house going, and they don't fit in the neighborhood, and they're tearing down. And you're quite aware of this, because you've been here since, I believe, 2009
I've been
as a
Pierrefonds all
borough
my life.
councillor.
All my life.
Right,
Mrs.
as a
Bond.
borough councillor,
Yes.
you've been here since 2009.
Yes.
So you've approved these, and if you can't remember that.
What's your question?
Well, why is this happening?
Well, when someone buys a home or buys a property, when somebody buys a home or a property, they go through the normal process, whether it's to renovate, whether it's to expand, whether it's to rebuild. All of those types of requests, as you know, probably more than most, go through the proper process to make sure that they get the end result, should it be approved and recommended by all these instances that it goes through at a city or a borough. And we're not any different from any other community. There's a process in place, committees in place, consultations in place. There's these types of mechanisms in every community that allow for a project and someone that owns. If I was to buy your property, for example, let's say I wanted to rebuild it, and I could, under the regulations in that city. There's a process for that. Nobody makes a decision on these types of projects unilaterally or single-handedly here or anywhere.
You've
There's a recommendation.
failed to mention
Hang on.
the
Hang on.
age
You
of
asked-
the
you asked a
building
question,
and
Mrs.
a
Bond.
historic.
Mrs. Bond, you asked a question. I'm responding to it. So even the historic relevance of any building has a process that it absolutely needs to respect. And so having said that, it does go through all that process. And so if the end result is that that home is demolished for whatever reason and then rebuilt in the design that you see once it's built, there has been a series of things that have taken place to get you there. It's not because we demolish a building that all of a sudden we want to demolish a building. There's a reason why that building may be demolishable, if you will. And so that's what I'm saying to you. And so yes, if a home is bought in an area and the person wants to build a larger home, for example, in today's standards, let's just say, if there is a process and a regulation that allows for that, they're able to explore that. And if the end result is what you see on that street, well, then that's the end result that council approves. And so, again, we may not agree on these things collectively, or you may not agree with some of these decisions, but understand that these decisions aren't taken, number one, lightly, and have never been taken unilaterally, because there's a legal process that's attached to it, a democratic process that's attached to it to bring us to that result. Thank you for your question, Mrs. Bond.
I guess next month I'll follow it up, since you
Please.
like to cut people off.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bond. Monsieur Brunet.
Oui, le 30 minutes est passé.
Mrs. Bond, you asked your two questions. Mrs. Bond, you asked your two questions. I appreciate it. You have a wonderful evening, ma'am. Monsieur Brunet.
Oui, on doit prolonger la période des questions. Ça
S'il vous
prendrait
plaît,
un
oui.
Proposeur secondaire. Parfait. On demande Mme Elena Benavides.
Bonsoir, Madame Benavides. Merci beaucoup. Merci. Oups.
Ok, merci. C'était sur le nouveau règlement sur les nuisances.
Oui.
Il y aura des amendes, je m'imagine, qui vont augmenter. Et je suis quand même très inquiète de tous ces règlements qui empêchent les gens de vivre leur vie. Et ça ne m'affecte pas personnellement, parce que je vois, même dans ma rue, il y a des gens qui stationnent sur leur pelouse, la voiture, parce que vous savez bien, c'est interdit de stationner dans la rue. Alors, ils ont 4 enfants, et ils ont 3 voitures, et ils n'ont pas d'espace, donc ils font ça. Et pourquoi les empêcher de vivre sur leur propriété tranquillement? Ça ne dérange pas. En été, ils vont mettre des graines et de la terre et la pelouse pousse. Ce n'est pas un problème. Alors, des fois, oui, des fois, ils montent des abris, mais ça, c'est l'hiver. Évidemment, en été, tout disparaît. Donc, pendant l'hiver, la vie est difficile pour tout le monde. Pourquoi encore faire la vie plus difficile aux citoyens? C'est ma question. Tout le monde est stressé actuellement. Pourquoi encore la ville souhaite stresser les gens davantage?
Madame Benavidez,
oui.
J'apprécie tellement votre question et je vais vous dire pourquoi. Le règlement existe déjà depuis longtemps.
Oui, je sais.
Que les gens n'ont pas le droit de stationner sur leur pelouse parce que les entrées sont là pour les autos. Ce n'est pas la responsabilité, et je le dis avec le plus de respect que j'ai dans moi, ce n'est pas la responsabilité de la ville, ni l'arrondissement, ni n'importe quelle communauté de trouver le stationnement pour les gens si les gens décident ou ils ont plus d'enfants ou ils ont 4 ou 5 autos pour stationner et ils n'ont pas la place. Je le dis avec respect, ce n'est pas le rôle de la ville et l'arrondissement de trouver la solution pour ça. Je vais vous dire pourquoi. Aussitôt que j'ai une plainte de quelqu'un qui me dit, parce qu'on reçoit tous des cas comme ça, où les gens nous disent « Mon voisin stationne son auto à chaque fois sur son pelouse en avant. Son bateau, il met son auto en arrière. Il a ouvert son clôture, les autos sont stationnées dans son cours arrière. » Le règlement existe depuis longtemps, ils n'ont pas le droit.
Oui, je sais.
Et aussitôt que quelqu'un nous lève le drapeau, nous, comme administration, on a la responsabilité pour mettre le règlement en vigueur et pas donner des contraventions. Le but, ce n'est pas de donner des contraventions partout. On donne des avis, on informe les gens qui n'ont pas le droit. Ce n'est pas pour faire l'argent. De toute façon, l'argent va à Montréal. Ce n'est pas nous. Ce soir, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? On amende le tarif associé à ces règlements. On augmente quand même pour empêcher les gens de stationner sur le cours. Vous savez qu'est-ce qui se passe? Parce que j'ai des gens autour de moi aussi qui le font. Vous l'avez dit, c'est facile le printemps, il met un peu de terre, un peu de semences, là, ça pousse, c'est correct, tout est beau, la vie est belle. Ce n'est pas le cas, dans plusieurs cas. Et ça va me faire plaisir, puis les gens qui nous écoutent aussi, de prendre les gens avec l'auto et d'aller visiter au printemps les gens qui stationnent sur le pelouse, puis ils ne font rien pendant l'année pour faire les réparations là. Imaginez si vous avez un voisin comme ça qui fait ça à l'année longue. Qu'est-ce que vous allez faire? Nous, comme responsables, on fait le plus possible pour garder au moins la paix, mais aussi de ne pas créer des nuisances au niveau de la communauté en laissant les gens stationner partout. Oui, puis l'accès aux véhicules d'urgence, les pompiers, etc., ça pose beaucoup de problèmes.
Mais c'est sur leur propriété, parce que la rue est toujours propre.
Ce n'est pas la propriété du résident, Mme Benavidez, avec respect. La partie en avant appartient à la ville. Vous savez, très bien.
Oui, mais c'est nous qui l'entretenons.
Non, je sais, madame, on peut faire le débat comme vous voulez parce que je vous connaissais assez bien. Oui. On peut faire ce débat, puis je vous respecte beaucoup. Je vous attends. Et encore, le but, ce n'est pas pour vraiment aller avec l'SPVM, arrêter les gens qui le font. C'est pour lancer un message. Si vous voulez continuer à faire ça, les avis vont changer pour des contraventions. Puis les contraventions aujourd'hui, suite à la réunion ce soir, si ça passe, ils ont des dents pour aller plus loin et d'essayer d'empêcher les gens. Moi, j'ai des voisins chez nous, près de chez nous, qui font des arrangements avec leurs voisins pour stationner les autos dans d'autres entrées. Ils font l'arrangement l'hiver. Je sais que des fois, ce n'est pas possible. Je sais et je comprends. Mais on ne peut pas être responsable pour quelqu'un qui a 4 ou 5 autos quand l'entrée a la place pour 3 ou 4 seulement. Malheureusement, ce n'est pas ça la responsabilité de l'arrondissement. Imaginez chez vous. C'est exactement la même chose. Mais encore, ce n'est pas pour pénaliser des gens, c'est juste pour renforcer et respecter les règlements qu'on a en vigueur depuis, je ne peux pas vous dire, depuis des décennies qu'on a à l'arrondissement. Mais malheureusement, beaucoup de gens ne respectent pas ces règlements. Puis on sait, puis je le sais.
Mais il faudra quand même faire des avis avant parce qu'il y a aussi des personnes qui ne connaissent pas les règlements. Ce n'est pas toujours facile de trouver les règlements dans votre système. Et vous savez, j'ai déjà essayé de trouver pour les piscines, que je n'en ai pas, mais pour des piscines, et c'est bien complexe. Alors, il faudrait avertir les gens parce qu'ils ne connaissent vraiment pas
le but, comme j'ai dit, ce n'est pas pour commencer à donner des contraventions. Vous avez dit que les gens ne sont pas informés.
Oui.
Il y avait une époque où les gens n'étaient jamais informés parce que c'était ça la vie à l'époque. Aujourd'hui, là, on est branché partout. Les élus, les médias sociaux, les sites web, services de com qu'on n'avait pas à l'époque nécessairement comme on a aujourd'hui. Les gens appellent maintenant le numéro pour avoir l'information. Des fois, ce n'est pas facile, hein, je vous dis. Ce n'est pas évident parce que moi, je fais les tests des fois aussi en appelant un numéro puis juste pour avoir des informations. Je sais que ce n'est pas parfait. Mais on a les outils en place pour répondre le plus possible aux résidents. Mais il y a des gens, et encore, ce n'est pas leur faute, ils sont vraiment déconnectés de la vie communautaire à ce niveau-là, parce qu'ils n'ont jamais demandé quoi que ce soit de l'arrondissement ou la ville. Comme ça, comment ils vont savoir si le règlement existe ou pas? Les tempos, je vous donne un exemple. Les tempos avant, les abris d'auto, vous savez, quand on a changé le règlement, on avait à peu près, corrigez-moi, M. Jacob, on avait plus que 900 qui ne respectaient pas le règlement. Vous savez, on a donné 2 ans. Vous vous souvenez, M. Jacob? On avait donné 2 ans pour les gens de se conformer au règlement. Puis là, vous savez, après 2 ans, combien on avait qui restait? Pas beaucoup. Pas beaucoup. Parce que les gens ils ont finalement compris le règlement, la distance, grandeur, couleur, etc. Est-ce qu'on a des problèmes un peu aussi aujourd'hui? Oui, effectivement, mais on n'a pas les 900. Peut-être on a 10, peut-être 15, 5. Ça veut dire que les gens ont finalement compris. Et le but dans ça, c'est exactement la même chose. On veut les informer. Si cette année, on donne la chance aux gens de se conformer pour l'année prochaine, parfait.
Bon,
c'est ça le but.
Au moins, vous leur donnez la chance cette année.
Ça fait. Mais regardez, Mme Benavides, we're not a money-making machine.
D'accord.
C'est pas ça le but. On fait ça pour donner le service, mais aussi respecter les autres résidents aussi qui voient ça comme une malaise chez eux.
Oui, je sais qu'il y a des gens qui se dérangent.
Effectivement.
Merci beaucoup.
Madame Benavides, merci. Bonsoir. Monsieur Brunet.
C'était la dernière question.
Merci beaucoup. On procède avec l'ordre du jour. Merci à tous ceux et celles qui ont posé des questions. Encore, je répète, comme je répète à chaque fois, les gens sont disponibles à l'arrondissement. En appelant le 3-1, vous pouvez avoir les réponses que vous voulez et vous pouvez aussi communiquer directement avec les élus pour d'autres questions. Et ça va nous faire, ce n'est pas pour vous décourager de venir aux séances du Conseil, ce n'est pas du tout ça que je dis, mais on a une façon de répondre à des questions avec beaucoup plus de détails quand ce n'est pas nécessairement ici aux séances du Conseil, quand des fois il manque de l'information. So again, it's not to discourage anybody from coming to Borough Council meetings because we love it when we have the room full and people ask questions, constructive criticism. We're very appreciative of that. But we also can tell you that there are other ways of reaching our administration, whether it be through 311, which isn't always perfect, I have to tell you. And I mentioned it to Madame Benavides. I've done the test myself. It's not always the perfect system. We've all done the test. It's not always the perfect system, but that is one of the tools. We also can reach out to the different services, and our doors are open here every day, Friday till noon. So we encourage you to reach out to us at a moment's notice and not necessarily wait a month if you don't have to, if you need something quick enough, please do not hesitate. But I'm very thankful and appreciative that folks come to these council meetings. 10.03. Que soit adopté tel que soumis lors du jour de la séance ordinaire du Conseil d'arrondissement de Pierrefonds-Roxboro du 15 janvier 2024.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. 10.04. Que soit approuvé le procès-verbal de séance ordinaire du Conseil tenu le 4 décembre 2023 à 19h, tel que soumis aux membres du Conseil avant la présente séance et versé aux archives de l'arrondissement. 10.04.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. Le 15.01. Que le Conseil d'arrondissement proclame l'arrondissement de Pierrefonds-Roxboro l'arrondissement allié contre la violence conjugale.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. Le 20.01. Que le Conseil d'arrondissement autorise une dépense totale de 117 079 taxes incluses pour les services d'hydro-excavation, incluant le traitement des matières résiduelles dans l'arrondissement de Pierrefonds-Roxboro, pour une durée de 2 ans sans option de renouvellement, que le contrat mentionné soit accordé au plus bas soumissionnaire conforme J-Tech Canada Inc., au montant de sa soumission soit 117 079 taxes incluses, que cette dépense soit payée selon les informations financières contenues au dossier décisionnel.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. Le 20.02. Que le Conseil d'arrondissement alloue une somme de 2 000 au Conseil jeunesse de Pierrefonds-Roxboro pour couvrir les dépenses éventuelles reliées à ses propres activités pour l'année 2024, que ce budget étant administré par la Division Culture, Bibliothèque et Développement social, que les dépenses correspondantes soient payées conformément aux informations financières contenues au sommaire décisionnel.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. Le 20.03, c'est exactement la même chose, mais pour le Conseil des aînés de Pierrefonds-Roxboro, un autre 2 000 $ de 20.03.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. Le 30.01, que soit approuvée telle que soumise aux membres du Conseil d'arrondissement la reddition financière, la liste des dépenses mensuelles par demande de paiement, des virements de la liste d'engagement des différents services de l'arrondissement de Pierrefonds-Roxboro au montant de 412 665, couvrant la période du 28 octobre au 24 novembre 2023, le 30.01.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. 40.01, Notice of motion is given by Councillor of the entry for adoption of any subsequent sitting bylaw, CA 29-010-12, amending bylaw number CA 29-010, concerning nuisances in good order in order, add the amount of fines prescribed for the prohibition of keeping temporary structures in place for more than 20 days, and for prohibition of parking any vehicle on private property in a location other than a parking space. 40.01.
Je donne l'avis de motion.
Merci. Le 40.02, que le Conseil d'arrondissement abroge le règlement 521 concernant certaines constructions dangereuses et insalubres de la cité de Pierrefonds. 40.02.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. 40.03, que soit approuvée la dérogation mineure au 84 rue des Lauriers visant à permettre dans la zone H1-8-452 pour un bâtiment résidentiel isolé sur le lot 6-450-508, un garage privé situé à 0,77 mètres au lieu du minimum requis de 1 mètre de la ligne de propriété. 40.03.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. Le 51.01. Que le Conseil d'arrondissement approuve la nomination de M. Benoît Langevin, conseiller de la ville de l'arrondissement de Pierrefonds-Roxboro, à titre du président du comité consultatif d'urbanisme pour une période de 2 ans, soit le 6 décembre au 31 octobre 2025.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. 51.02. Que Mme Catherine Clément-Talbot, conseillère de la ville district de Cap-Saint-Jacques, soit nommée mairesse suppléante de l'arrondissement de Pierrefonds-Roxboro pour la période du 16 janvier 2024 au 3 juin 2024, inclusivement, conformément à l'article 20.2 de la Charte de la Ville de Montréal.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
C'est dans 2 jours. Merci, Monsieur le maire et le Conseil pour la nomination.
60.01, avec plaisir. Que le Conseil d'arrondissement prenne acte du dépôt du procès-verbal de la séance d'assemblée publique des consultations tenues le 4 décembre 2023 concernant le premier projet de résolution CA 23-29-02-95.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. 60.02. Que le Conseil d'arrondissement prenne acte du dépôt du procès-verbal de la réunion du comité consultatif d'urbanisme tenue le 6 décembre 2023.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci. Le 60.03, Que le Conseil d'arrondissement prenne acte du dépôt de la réponse du greffier de l'arrondissement relativement à un projet de pétition présenté en vertu de l'annexe B du règlement de la Charte montréalaise des droits et des responsabilités et sur le droit d'initiative.
Je propose. J'appuie.
Merci. Ça nous amène à la fin, le 70-01, que la séance soit levée.
Je propose.
J'appuie.
Merci à vous tous dans la salle et les gens qui nous regardent par le web diffusion et au mois prochain. Merci beaucoup. Bonsoir.